Hello, Caroline.
Hello, Yelena.
So, Caroline Lamb is the founder of the Striking Attitudes. So, tell us, Caroline, how did you come to the idea to found this dancing company?
Well, I suppose I started the company initially as a vehicle really for my own choreographic work. So when I first started it, which was way back, I was working with dancers who were, I suppose, in their 30s, maybe their 40s, 20s even. And for a while then, I did quite a lot of productions that I got some funding for from the Arts Council. And then for a while, the company went dormant. And I was very busy doing other work, choreographic work. And I didn't lose interest, but I got involved with other things. So then I got a lot older as a dancer, and I started to feel that I was going to have to change the way I worked and certainly the way I danced. And also, I did a production at that time, which was a multi-generational production. And that had people really from the age of 7 to 70 plus even working. And after we did the production, a small group of dancers came up to me and said, would I continue with some work with this particular group? And the group were, let's say, on average, they were 50 years old, maybe a little bit older, a bit younger. And so I started to concentrate more because it suited them, but it also suited me to develop work with what I call the older dancer, the mature body. So it's really transitioned from a company that was primarily just about me developing my own personal voice, my own personal choreographic style, into something else. And it came about naturally because I became older as a dancer, and I knew several other people who were also in that position. So that's really how it started and then how it developed.
So, when the dancer becomes older dancer?
Well, you're asking me when they become an older dancer. Well, yeah. I think technically in the world of ballet, and of course here we're really talking about contemporary dance, I think people often feel that by the time you get to the age of 40, it's getting very, very hard, to continue at the level with that technique, which is so intense and so demanding. So I think, in the ballet world, really 40 is often considered, yes, the benchmark. And I know that at a certain point, I don't know if this is still the case with ballet companies, dancers were actually given the heave-ho, given the push, and that was it, you're 40 and you're over. But in contemporary dance, I think, because although it's a demanding technique, it's not quite as demanding. So I think, one can continue for a little bit longer. But really, I mean, come the time you reach your mid 40s onwards, your body really is changing. You don't have the strength generally, or rather, perhaps I should say, you have to work very, very hard to keep that kind of strength. And everything is getting sort of weaker rather than stronger, unless you, as I say, work extremely hard, so I would say within your 40s you start to you notice a lot of changes from, let's say, when you were 20, 25. The energies are just not the same. The body shifts, particularly for a woman. There's a lot of hormonal stuff that you have to deal with as well. That all everything changes really. So yeah, I would loosely say that. I'm sure there are people out there who would maybe argue the case, but I think that's a reasonable assessment.
And you found a way how to continue your work and continue to dance, because this was not something that was done, but you decided that it should be like this, right? Like you kind of pushed the boundaries there, right?
Yes, I guess I guess I did a bit. I think around the same time, there were a lot of other people who had trained in contemporary dance and who were reaching that kind of age, because really contemporary dance came over really to Britain in the late 60s. And I certainly, my training, I finished training, I went to Dartington College of Arts, which was down in Devon, and then I went to London and continued some evening classes and some training there. And I've forgotten what the question was, frankly. What was what was it that you asked me? Oh gosh.
I asked you, did you push the boundaries with
Oh yeah, did I push the boundaries? Yeah, I was just going off onto a track about my training and and all of that. So yes, so I think I suppose what I'm saying is there were some other people around the same time reaching the same sort of stage, you know. So I think also at that time it was considered not unusual to start to do work with community based dancers who were older, but continuing as professional dancers was less likely. And so I think, you know, trying to push that side of things, yes, I mean, it was challenging a few boundaries. I know there was one other lady, a woman from Ballyromber, and she continued to try and, well, create a professional group who were all in their kind of 50s, even 60s, I think. So apart from her, I don't know, it's not to say that there aren't, but I don't know of any other company that was particularly trying to also push the professional dancer alongside the dancer from the community. And I've certainly found also, you know, as I've gone on working in this area, that those divisions kind of disappear the longer we go on. And in the end, it's ultimately about people who want to dance, who want to continue to move, and the fact that they may have, you know, trained or not trained is kind of by the by in a way. It doesn't really matter.
And when you make a production, okay, sometimes you do it with professionals and sometimes in combination with community dancers. And what is your first step? How does production appears for you? How do you decide what you will do? How does this creative process looks like?
The creative process. Well, it's always a very interesting one, the creative process, and I never quite know how it happens in lots of ways. And I like to work from lots and lots of different starting points. Sometimes it might be just a sentence in a bit of poetry, or it might be a picture, an image of some sort. It might be just a feeling. And it's about, for me, it's about actually trusting yourself, which is quite scary, really, and just going with, I suppose, going with your gut, going with the feelings and the ideas and images that, for me, I always consider that they're sort of in the back of my head somewhere, and they're just sort of, yeah, they're there, and they're just sitting around, and they're waiting to be let loose and nurtured and developed. And so I often just start with something very small, and it might be just a movement, it might be a very short movement sequence, it might be something like, at the moment, I'm just starting work on the idea of the self-portrait. So I've found some photographs of somebody, and it's about that a portrait is being made of this person, but the part of the body that's being shown is primarily their hands, and they're in all these different sort of shapes and positions. And I'm using that as a starting point. And alongside that, I'm thinking about nature as well. So in this second session that I'm going to do with the group, The first session we worked just on the idea of some hand shapes and how that kind of worked with the rest of your body. In this session, I'm going to ask them to bring something from nature. So it might be a flower, it might be a branch with leaves on it, it might be a dead root or something, but something from nature. And so we're going to work with the idea of this bit of nature that's going to be held in the hand, which is part of the image that we had. And I'm going to see where we can go with it, you know, but it's actually, I find it quite a scary process, really, because you're putting your little ideas out that come from the, as I say, the head. They also come from the heart. They come from somewhere inside you as well. And you're kind of throwing them out to people and you're hoping that they're going to find them interesting, that they're going to respond in a good way, that the things that might energize me are not necessarily the things that will energize other people. But, you know, when you're the choreographer, the plus side is that you can say, right, guys, this is what we're doing and this is what we're working with. But then the group, you know, the great thing about this group is that they will take the images, take the ideas and do something of their own with them. And, you know, you ask how I start on something. I mean, I think one of the key things is to set up a working environment where people feel safe to do their own thing, to try out their own thing. And that actually takes quite a long time to establish that and to understand, and for people to understand there's no right, there's no wrong. It's not about learning lots of steps, but it's about working with your body, you know, your brain, your heart, your soul, the whole thing, and allowing yourself to be open to these ideas that the choreographer might bring in. So it's a very delicate process in lots of ways, and it's exposing for me, but it's exposing for them as well. And of course, because currently we're working on Zoom, you know, it's a massively different experience from how it would be in the studio. And we're really, you know, I'm particularly having to think about that and to see how we can still be creative within these kind of confines.
Yeah, many people that we interviewed, your members, they were mentioning this inner process and personal material. And what is your favorite part of that? Is it the beginning, the research, or is it the performances itself? What is your favorite piece, if you have one?
My favorite piece?
Like favorite piece of the creative process.
Oh, favorite piece of the creative process, sorry. Yes, that's yeah, you see, I'm having to think about that. Well, I particularly like the point at which you have given out your ideas and you're starting to really shape the piece, and suddenly at a certain point in rehearsal, because it is like the blind leading the blind, really. I always think, you know, when you're choreographing and you've got these ideas to start with, but you rarely know how it's going to turn out, you know. But at a certain point, things start to kind of make sense. Certainly, well, to me as the choreographer, I think, oh, yes, that's what I'm aiming for. That's where I'm going. Yes, I see. Yes, I understand. And so there's a point where it all starts to kind of gel, because in the first place, it's a very unknown process, as I probably keep emphasizing, you know, and then you get to a point where you've sort of got so far, but you don't really know where you're going. And then you start to get really worried about it. And then a bit further down the line, hopefully you find this quite magic place where everything, it's like a jigsaw puzzle and it starts to sort of interlock. And then of course you've got that moment when you pretty much shape the piece and you're trying to rehearse it, and then you're trying to get the very fine sort of details of exactly the exact details. Because the interesting thing is that I think a lot of people would probably say that as a choreographer, I'm quite open to ideas. I'm quite sort of relaxed in a way, you know, about it. But at a certain point further down the line, I get very, very specific about exactly what it should be. And often, I'm sure Janet, you know, our rehearsal director, will bear me out on this, because she's performed many times in my works. I'm still right at the very end. I'm kind of saying, oh, look, can you just do this like that? And, you know, you've got to have this kind of energy for that bit. And there's all these last minute things just before a performance. And obviously then the performance is a wonderful thing. And you really hope it's all going to work. But you're so sort of, I always am when I watch my piece for the first time. I'm always so nervous I can hardly kind of breathe, you know, and in a way you barely see the piece then, because you're just living through every moment. So in a way, I think I find the rehearsal process very, very interesting, and the development of the piece, and particularly, as I say, a little bit further down the line where it starts to make some sense.
And do you have some relation while you're creating a performance, what the audience will see, what will be the relation to the audience, you know, how they will be involved? Do you think about it, or you're just creating whatever?
Oh yeah, no, I totally think about, I think very much about the audience. And frankly, I believe that all choreographers should think about the audience, you know, because mostly they've paid to come and see your work, you know, and I feel that it's important for the choreographer to ultimately to know what they are trying to say. And you know, for me, often there is some kind of narrative is, I don't know whether I would say there's some, yeah, in some of my pieces is narrative, and not in all of them necessarily, but generally they are led as a journey from a beginning, you know, through the middle to an end point that somehow makes some kind of probably emotional sense, hopefully some logical sense even, although that's not a word I would generally use. But I think you owe it to an audience to work hard to try and translate, you know, what it is you want to say to the audience, and to say it in the best way possible. And actually I get cross with sort of sloppy choreography where people, you know, you see a lot of pieces that are indulgent, and I don't want to speak badly about, so would never mention names or anything, but I do believe that we should think about the audience, you know, that I don't mean that we should be working for effect, you know, that we should just be looking to be showy and work for effect, but that I think we owe it to an audience. And the ideal thing is it's an engagement, you know, between the people who've come to watch, the people who are performing, and the two energies kind of coming together.
Because you created with the striking attitudes, I don't know about the rest, but I know what have you done with the striking attitudes, and they're different aesthetics and different mediums inside, but
Yeah.
it seems like there is a certain poetics. And how would you describe it?
Yeah.
And what has guided you? Like, what is your motivation, vision, however you want to say it? Because you know, it's been like a long time you're doing this job, and it's I guess it's not a job anymore for you, so it's more than that.
Yeah. Yes, I suppose what has guided me, well, I think I always need to find a starting point, and the starting point is always about actually your inner voice and what you want to say, really, what you want to say in that very particular moment. And of course that particular thing, that particular moment has changed, you know, changes as one is in a different stage of life. I would say my work is always essentially dramatic, you know, it's always, I tend to look at the larger than life things. I have done comedy work, and that's fine, and you know, that's quite fun, but I'm always, I guess I'm quite I think I'm quite a spiritual person, and I think I look at life, I think I've written this about myself somewhere, that I look at life as through opera glasses, as though, you know, everything's sort of larger than life. And I think about life, and I think about death, and I think about the stages in between, and it's the big things, you know, that always drive me. But they might be quite small starting points, but essentially they're kind of big things. One of my the bits of work that I'm most, if I dare say the word, proud of, a piece of work that I think was successful, you know, amongst some of the work that probably wasn't so successful, which is the way it is when you're an artist, it's up and it's down, you know. But one of the pieces that I felt most involved with was my film Footfalls. And the point, I think the reason I did that film was really because my father had died and my mother was getting very old, and I saw the journey of life in front of me, and I was getting older myself, and I think it's all about a journey, isn't it? Everything, it's about a journey, you know, from one place to another place, with all these stopping places along the way. And so I wanted to do a film that was really about our journey in life, and also about our kind of how incredibly small, tiny we are in, you know, we're just these little dots in the universe, you know. And I chose to represent this all by filming throughout the 4 seasons. So, you know, I had the spring, the summer, the winter, and so on and so forth, the autumn. And that to me was a sort of representation in a way of our journey through life. And it was a fascinating experience. I worked with a wonderful young cinematographer, and there was probably about 30 years between us in terms of age, but we just really hit it off, and it was fantastic. And he did wonderful things with the camera, and I just had to tell him what I wanted, and he could see it, you know, and he had a great eye for movement, which really helps because, you know, movement, dance on camera is a very different thing from in the, you know, live. So, so really I saw that, yeah, it's a big subject, if you like, and I chose to do it through the seasons, the span of a whole year we filmed in. So I think I'm kind of very motivated by that kind of thing. I see very much the older I get, the more I see the fragility of life, and how small we are, and how sort of vulnerable we are, you know. And equally on the other side of that, I see people like some of the people who come to my sessions, you know, are older, and yet they're just kind of out there with all this energy, throwing themselves into the thing and really going for it. So that's the other thing, is really about the human spirit, you know, and it's, you know, for lots of people that's a very powerful thing. I don't know if I quite answered the question, but anyway.
I think you did.
Yeah. Okay, good. Excuse me.
Well, yeah, I'm still like thinking about so many stuff, but when you said at the beginning that, you know, with the artist, sometimes you have more success and then less, etc. And the main thing that, like, I'm so impressed, like, with what all of you have been doing, because for me, it's full of history, but it's also full of strength. And this, when you go up, it's easy to be up because you're in a hype. But when you are down and maybe something or some piece is not super successful, and like, how did you manage through your career to go through this, like, you know, down points?
Yeah. Oh God, it can be really devastating, you know, if you feel that a piece hasn't gone well. And I remember one particular piece that actually I think was fine looking back on it. But I remember, doing this particular piece, I mean, many years ago now, and I'd put my heart and soul into it, like you always do.
Yes.
Otherwise, what's the point, really?
Exactly.
And I remember having kind of feeling that I wasn't getting the response that I entirely wanted, And I remember feeling very desperate about it, because it is very exposing. I mean, I guess you could say, if you don't want the negative feedback, don't put yourself out there, don't bother to do it, but you can't help it because that's what you do. And it's the creativity that kind of keeps you. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have an outlet for creativity. I mean, if I'm not doing it in this way, I guess I'm doing it in my garden or my house or something. So it's tough if you get a sort of what you feel is a negative feedback. And I remember we got a review there was some good stuff in it, but there was also a couple of negative comments, and it's very hard. And you sort of go away and you kind of curl up and you hide away for a while, and you think, oh, that's it, I better give up now, time to give up, or what shall I do? It's tough, but you kind of, I guess the desire to keep creating, to keep expressing yourself is strong enough that eventually you kind of realign yourself, you pick yourself up and you carry on. But I think people who say, I mean, some people say, oh, I never read reviews. Well, I admire them if they don't read reviews. But I always do read reviews. And I've had many good reviews, but occasionally I've had the, negative comments. And yeah, it's very hard. I don't know, really. You ask how I do it. Well, I think it's just time. Time passes and you kind of adjust something in your head, and you have another go, I suppose.
Yeah, I just see the creative work and any art as a very vulnerable profession. And that's why I find inspiring to talk to people who are for a long time in this kind of a business, if I can call it that, because this kind of a strength is very unique. And I realize this more and more, and I find it very, very precious.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you. Do you have something that I didn't ask you, but you would like to say?
Not that I can think of. No, just to say, I suppose that I think, following on that comment, the other thing is, as you get older, with everything in life, you learn to cope with these things, and you learn that, there's the ups, there's the downs, and you have to just keep riding. Basically, you have to keep going, and that can be very hard. And I think artists in general, I mean, it probably sounds terribly indulgent, this, but I think artists in general are prone to a lot of ups and downs, and really, I guess it's only if you really want to continue to say something to the world that you keep on doing it, because otherwise I guess you would just say, okay, forget it, I'll just watch the telly and do the garden or whatever. And to be honest, I do sometimes think about that. There are times when I think, oh gosh, I'm still doing it. Wow, have I really still got something to say? But I have got something to say, I think. And doing the work we did in the pandemic, which has been so absolutely horrendous for everybody, just the project that we did called What I Need to Tell You was I think was probably mildly cathartic for everybody to have that chance to work together and say something to each other every week, and I'm glad that I was still doing it at that point, because I think it would have been harder not to be, and just to be shut away with no chance of, expressing where we all are. Although there wasn't a lot of, it wasn't that we were all sitting around going, oh, isn't it terrible, on the contrary, we were using movement and ideas and writing and as a means of ultimately saying, isn't it terrible? You know, isn't it hard, this? But also trying to look for the good bits. So yeah, I think it's important as an artist to try and keep, if you feel you've still got something to say, it's important to keep pressing on, basically. That sounds so British, I can't believe it. Pressing. We all just keep, you know, pressing on. Yeah, why not? Yeah. Yeah, it's not very sort of exciting, but I mean, that's what it boils down to, doesn't it? Just keeping doing it.
But also the process that you mentioned, and what I need to tell you, the people that we talked to, they did emphasize how even it was the Zoom, which they don't prefer as a means of
No.
work. It helped them to be in this creative process, which helped them cope with everything that was happening around them. And I know that like this can like help to anybody to be in creative process in a difficult situations, to really think in a different way and kind of go through situations in a different way. So yes,
I
thank you
agree.
so
I
much.
agree. Yeah, good. Well, thank you. I hope it
And
was
thank you for this conversation, Caroline.
okay.
I can talk to you for hours. We will
Why
do it
not?
once.
Lovely. Thank you.